Good evening. Welcome to the City Council meeting for April 28th, 2020. This meeting is being conducted in accordance with Governor Sisolak's Emergency Directive number 006. As a result, we're all observing social distancing here. Councilwoman Hoskins is participating via phone. And the public is asked to not come to City Hall during this period of time. We will provide a phone number for public comment. The city staff has also set up viewing at the Elaine K. Smith building for people who may not have internet access. With that, I'll go ahead and call the meeting to order. And our first item is the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, we'll have our first public comment period. Public comment during this portion of the meeting is limited to items on the agenda. There is a limit of 5 minutes for each person wishing to speak. And the phone number to call is 589-9629. We do have City Manager Al Noyola has requested to speak in public comment, so if you'd like to speak first.
Honorable Mayor and Council, thank you very much for the opportunity. From time to time, we do take the opportunity to recognize special events that happen in individuals' lives. Unfortunately, we do find ourselves in the middle of coronavirus, and typically in these kinds of events, I might actually even bring, something for the individual to maybe participate in and eat and maybe blow it out. But the problem is that might potentially spread additional viruses and whatnot. So we're going to forgo that, but maybe perhaps in the future when we can have a full-fledged celebration of somebody's birthday, that perhaps we might bring a cake at that time. But it would be remiss of me, and I would not want to make that same mistake twice, to not recognize the birthday of one of our council members, Tracy Folda. So on three, if you all could join with me to sing and wish her a happy birthday. 1, 2, 3. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, Councilwoman Folda. Happy birthday to you.
And many more.
Thank you very much, everyone.
I guess we'll actually call that a public announcement rather than public comment. Happy birthday, Councilwoman Folda. Hey, do we have someone on the line? Okay, please go ahead.
Public comment.
Yes, I'd like to make a public comment on agenda issue number 5.
Go ahead.
For today. Do you want to record me, or how does this work?
You can just start talking, and you have up to 5 minutes.
Okay, well, I won't need 5 minutes, but on agenda number 5, it's a much needed service, the cemetery mortuary. It's much needed in Boulder City, Nevada. I've known Mr. Mike Tyson. Yes?
Can you please state your name for the record?
Okay, I am sorry. I am Pastor Russ Marsh. I'm the senior pastor of Boulder City Christian Fellowship.
Thank you.
And a long-time Boulder City resident. And I believe that it's much needed, the services that Mr. Tyson Smith is offering, and that's with agenda number 5. I've known him for several years. I feel he's an honest, fair, and just a good person, and I would trust him, and I think that really is a much-needed service, and it's needed for the community, especially at times like this, when people don't have a chance necessarily to mourn or grieve. I think this is an important thing because people have to go outside of Boulder City for services such as this. So I fully support this, and I think that it would behoove the city to grant this motion to go ahead on Agenda 5. And that's pretty much what I have to say. I trust Mr. Tyson, and I trust the council. Thank
you very much.
God bless, and have a blessed day. Although I didn't hear you open up in prayer, and that took me back a little bit. I wish you did that.
We will be asking to restart our invocations here soon. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Have a blessed day.
Do we have another caller? Hey, the line is available. Again, the phone number is 702-589-9629. And anyone wishing to speak in public comment, the phone number is 702-589-9629. I'll give the phone number one more time, 702-589-9629, if you wish to speak in public comment. All right, hearing no others, then I will close public comment.
I have some to read into the record.
Oh, excuse me. City Clerk has some public comment that was submitted in writing prior to the meeting. She will now read those into the record. Thank you.
The first public comment is from Joan Paolini regarding agenda item number 8. She has no position. Her comment is, if the city has been living with a 6-month email retention policy, so be it. But in my opinion, the retention time should not be reduced. Judy Deshane submitted written comments regarding items 3, 4, 5, 6, and 8. With respect to item 3, 4, and 5, she states introduction of 1869, 1870, 1871. What changed that these 3 bills are being introduced a second time? All 3 were introduced at the 3/10/20 meeting. Item 6, 1872 was introduced at 2/10/20 meeting, and now this one is an action item. What is different between this one and the 3 being reintroduced tonight? Item 8, discussion of retention of email communication for 6 months. Why only 6 months? I've seen a number of news items where at least a couple of years have passed and someone gets emails under the Freedom of Information Act. So Fed, state, and other cities and government organizations must retain emails much longer than 6 months. Why not Boulder City? The citizens pay for software and hardware and tech support every year, so why can't emails be kept? And the final written one for the first public comment is from Letty Zimmerman of Lend a Hand. Her comments pertain to item number 7, and she states, Lend a Hand is a nonprofit volunteer organization that provides transportation, in-home services, companionship, and equipment loans to seniors and disabled residents in Boulder City. We also provide respite for their caregivers. Currently, transportation for life-sustaining medical appointments is nearly half of our service. This usually requires out-of-town travel for specialist services such as dialysis, chemotherapy, x-rays, and imaging. This year, we are requesting funds to support our volunteer coordinator salary. This person matches availability of our 70 volunteers to serve the needs of our 300 clients. We appreciate that over our 30-year history, the city has continued to support us with CDBG grant funds. And that's it for the first public comment period.
Thank you. All right. Again, we'll now close public comment then and move to agenda item, approval of the regular agenda. Any changes, Madam City Clerk?
No changes.
I see Mr. City Attorney is approaching. No changes from City Attorney and Mr. City Manager.
No changes.
Okay, we'll bring it to council for possible changes.
No changes.
No changes.
Councilwoman Hoskins?
No changes.
All right, I'll move them for approval of the regular agenda.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, unanimous approval. Approval of the consent agenda. Again, any changes, Madam City Clerk?
Yes, Mayor, staff is recommending removal of items number 1 and 2.
Thank you. Mr. City Attorney? No further changes, Your Honor. Thank you. Mr. City Manager?
No further changes, Your Honor.
Thank you. Council, any changes?
No changes.
No changes.
No changes.
Just as a comment out of curiosity, if we're essentially removing all the item, I guess, never mind, I've already answered my question.
Still requires a motion.
That's right.
And again, I will move for approval then with the changes requested.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. That's also unanimous with changes. We'll then proceed to item number 3. Again, there was a question in public comment, written public comment about why these are on the agenda. Bills that are introduced must be heard within a 30-day period of time due to the cancellation of council meeting due to the emergency, state of emergency. Those bills were not able to be heard, so they are being reintroduced again tonight. Item number 3 is introduction of Bill 1869. Anyone wishing to make that introduction?
I'll make that introduction. Of 1869, waive reading except for title.
Thank you.
Bill number 1869, an ordinance of the City of Boulder City, Nevada, to amend Title 11, Chapter 8 of the City Code to allow up to two permanent residences in an RV park, AM 19-341. Bill 1869 will be considered at the May 12th, 2020 regular City Council meeting.
Thank you. Item number 4 is introduction of Bill 1870.
I'll make a motion to introduce Bill number 1870, waive the reading by title only.
Bill number 1870, an ordinance of the City of Boulder City, Nevada, to amend Title 11, Chapters 8 of the City Code to allow permanent accessory buildings and structures on RV lots. Did I just AM 20-346. And this bill will also be be considered at the May 12th meeting.
Thank you. Again, it is a bill introduction. That will bring us to item number 5, introduction of Bill 1871. Anyone wishing to introduce that bill?
I'll move to introduce Bill number 1871, waive the reading and title only.
Bill number 1871, an ordinance of the City of Boulder City, Nevada, to amend Title 11, Chapter 10 of the City Code to allow funeral homes, mortuaries, and columbaria as a conditional use in the C1 neighborhood commercial zone, and make related amendments to Chapters 3, 10, and 11 to clarify where these and related uses, cemeteries and mausoleums, are allowed, AM 20-347, and this bill will also be considered at the May 12th, 2020 regular City Council meeting.
Thank you. That now brings us to agenda item number 6, Bill number 1872.
Rebecca Gillis, I'm the accounting manager in the finance department, and I am here to ask for consideration of Bill number 1872, an ordinance of the City of Boulder City to amend Title I, Chapter 9. This is to create a risk management fund and also seeking amendments to the 4 special revenue funds that were created in the fall, just to adjust the wording on the funding source. So risk management begins with the realization that a government's going to eventually suffer a loss of some kind. So once that's realized, it's important that we take steps to anticipate those losses and minimize those adverse effects. This additional fund will allow the city to coordinate our efforts and to be more transparent by putting all of our expenditures and revenues into a single fund. So this risk management fund is authorized under the NRS 354-6215, which allows us to establish a fund for insurance purposes. This fund would only be applicable to our governmental funds and not to our enterprise funds. The GFOA considers this a best practice, that we house most of our risk-related costs and reimbursements into a single fund. So this includes our insurance premiums and deductibles, claims not covered by our insurance, legal defense and settlement proceeds, subrogation, and internal fund reimbursement for workers' comp insurance premiums. And this slide shows an example of expenditures and revenues from fiscal year 2019 that would be housed in this fund if it's approved. As you can see off to the side of the description, there are many different locations where we had to dig, hunt, and peck for these expenditures and revenues. So having this fund will allow us to clearly see what our risk-related costs are. If this fund is approved, the city attorney's professional services budget would be reduced by $100,000, which is what was budgeted for in fiscal year 20. You can see in fiscal year 2019, there was only $18,150 that was actually spent on professional services related to risk management. And then those expenditures would now be paid out of this fund. Other funding is necessary to ensure that we have the money to pay for these deductibles, expenditures, and other claims that may come to the city. So staff is recommending that we transfer 10% of our greater than anticipated revenues received in the general fund, reduced by any negative variance in the total general fund expenditures as identified in the prior year's audited CAFR. One thing I did fail to mention, it's in the staff report, but it is excluded from the code that needs to be changed, is the 1% of solar lease revenues as well. So I will need to make that amendment. This is the exact same funding sources as the other 4 funds that were created in the fall. This next slide is an example of where these numbers would come from. Just to be very clear to everyone where the numbers will come from every year, that they'll come from our audited financial statements and from these specific lines. And that's why we're cleaning up that wording. So Giving the example from fiscal year 2019, 10% would be the $302,730 that could be transferred into this risk management fund. Then we also suggest putting a cap on the fund. In this case, it would be 10% of our general fund expenditures for the prior fiscal year, excluding any federal funds expended. And so again, here's our example from our audited financial statements with the lines that would be used. Therefore, our fund balance could not exceed the $3 million in fiscal year 20. In the budget that was presented last week, there is an anticipating funding of about $1.5 million in fiscal year 21 if the fund is approved. And then this is, again, just amending the wording of the 4 special revenue funds that were approved in the fall to mirror this new risk management fund, just to be very clear where those numbers are coming from. It's not changing anything, we're just cleaning up the wording. Are there any questions?
Questions or comments? Councilwoman Hoskins?
Thank you. I looked this over. I think it would be good not only for the financial administration, but also for transparency.
Thank you. Anyone else? Councilwoman Bridges?
Yeah, the insurance premiums and deductibles, that includes pull-pack premium?
So that's our workers' comp and our liability insurance.
Okay. And there was, what did I say? So this is basically another situation of a fencing money. And from what I understand, the money is put into this account, and if not used, it can go back into the general fund? Within limitation that...
it's in the NRS. Let me just pull it out real quick.
Yeah, there was...
I think it was on one of the
I
slides.
believe the NRS statement was...
Which slide was it?
Can't find. Sorry.
Okay, so it's provided the money in the fund at the end of the fiscal year may not revert to any other fund or be a surplus for any other purpose other than the purpose specified.
Okay, it says prize fund.
So this would not revert to the general fund.
It would not.
But if council chose to reduce the cap on the fund, then we could.
So if I may just add, maybe perhaps the question should be, if the council changes the policy as how we determine the cap, say instead of 10%, that you want to reduce it down to 7.5% or 5%, then the excess that is in that fund would then revert back to the fund that was utilized to put the monies there in the first place, which in essence, this would be the general fund.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Councilwoman Folda?
Thank you. Yeah, and I want to thank you for that slide, especially the slide number 6, because that's a question I had asked is, what are the funds that we've used previously? If we had this fund, what would be the cost associated with? And it was a research project. It wasn't just very clear to say, oh, this is exactly how much we spent on this or that. They're coming from different accounts. And I think this account clarifies how much is being spent and where it's being spent. And I mean, these are not only for liability issues, but a lot of these costs are regular costs that we incur just having insurance premiums and things that happen. So I think it's a lot clearer. It clarifies where the money's coming, how much is being spent, and I think that's a good thing. And NRS not only creates this, but it governs where that money comes from. And so I'm glad that there's better wording in here that clarifies where the source is. That helps it comply with NRS as well. And I think that's it. The other question actually was funding this could be not only if we change the policy, I guess, to change the cap on how much goes in, but this is not a mandatory funding that has to be funded every year as well, right?
It wouldn't be mandatory. We're recommending that it's the 10% of greater than anticipated revenues and the 1% of solar lease revenues.
So every year, the council, obviously, through the budget process, would review the recommendations that staff would make in terms of the funding and what should go there up to that maximum amount. Clearly, we would be looking at the prior year in terms of expenditures. Some of the expenditures are obviously something that we can anticipate, like our costs for insurance and so forth and so on, but others not so much. So we would start looking at, what has been the history on, say, litigation cost, payouts, that sort of thing, and then try to average that and put that into the figure as well. So the council has the ability, it's not mandatory that you fund it up to that point every year. You have the option of up to what amount, but not to exceed the policy that would be adopted currently, which is a maximum of 10% of expenditures, correct?
10% of greater than anticipated revenues.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. So there is some flexibility with the money going in each year as well. And that's another thing that why I asked for those numbers is because, yes, there's some differentiation from year to year as far as liability, and it's really hard to track that without having an account that it's attached to. So thank you.
And I just wanted to, follow up on that line. Next year, if we find that the funds that have been put into this account exceed whatever the costs are during the next fiscal year, we can make an adjustment on the amount of funding for this account to try and approximate what we think the costs are going to be. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. What happens going the other way if there's a greater number of, let's say, deductibles that are received during the year that require payment? Where would that money come from?
It would have to come out of the general fund.
General fund, okay. Because previously it's showing central services was funding that. Mm-hmm. So the preference would be not to use that, but to use ending balance of general fund or just general fund revenue.
It would have to be absorbed in the budget, the approved budget.
It'll be part of whatever has already been budgeted. We would have to take it out of other expenditure line items and then transfer it into there. You would not be able to use ending fund balance in order to make up any unanticipated expenditures unless there is new revenues that come in that were not budgeted. Then you can augment the budget with the new revenues in order to cover that expenditure if the council needed it.
All right, thank you. Any other questions or comments?
Well,
Councilman Adams?
I'll just comment that I think, for me, one of the biggest benefits here is the transparency factor. Knowing and seeing where the money is coming from, where that money, how the money got into the fund, where it gets spent. I think that's a huge factor when people talk about wanting to see transparency in government. A big part of that is seeing transparency in the fund. So for me, that is probably one of the biggest benefits to setting up a fund like this.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments?
Are you still there, Councilwoman Hoskins?
Yes, I am.
Okay, with that then I'll entertain a motion for approval of Bill 1872.
Mayor, I move to approve Bill number 1872.
I'll second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, that's unanimous approval. Thank you, Ms. McGillis. Yes. That will bring us then to item number 7 for possible action, matters pertaining to the Community Development Block Grant Program. We have Mr. Mays, Community Development Director.
Good evening, Mayor and members of the City Council. The item before you this evening is related to an interlocal agreement between Boulder City and Clark County. This agreement provides 3% of the community development block grant funds that the county receives to Boulder City. That for fiscal year 2021 will be approximately $241,000. Per HUD and Clark County guidelines, only a maximum of 15% of those funds can be utilized for public service contributions and activities. Each year, we solicit applications from nonprofit organizations that meet the eligibility requirements for these funds. And as has been the case for almost 30 years for both entities, Lend a Hand and Emergency Aid have submitted applications to utilize a portion of those funds. Emergency Aid is seeking $26,000 of those funds, specifically $26,787, and Lend a Hand is seeking $9,411 for a total amount of $36,198. You have a resolution before you for your consideration, as well as a requirement for a public hearing to consider their funding requests. And I will answer any questions.
Questions or comments? Councilwoman Bridges?
Yes, I think this is probably a good time for me to disclose that I'm the one who wrote the grant proposal for emergency aid to Boulder City. I've been writing their grant proposals for over 5 years, and therefore I believe it is in everybody's best interest that I abstain from this discussion and the vote.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments?
Well, I have a comment.
Councilwoman Hoskins?
Yes, I'm impressed that two different organizations can work well together for 30 years, and it's very enlightening to hear that. So it's a very good situation here that we should be very proud of. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else?
I think everybody knows that both of these organizations are very deserving. They provide absolutely wonderful services to our community, and I think they are part of what makes our community so strong and so great. So I certainly haven't. What more can I add after 30 years of this partnership? So,
Councilwoman Folda?
I just, along those lines, just want to agree that, especially during these times, these two nonprofits have been essential to our community. They're helping people with medical and food and rent and all sorts of things. And really, the volunteers are, also the lifeblood of Boulder City. And I'm glad that we have this opportunity to continue this relationship with those nonprofits.
Thank you. And again, Mr. Mays, you've pointed out in this material that this is under an interlocal agreement with Clark County. So Clark County receives funding from the federal government, and that agreement has been in place now for 20 years, 30 years?
Over 30 years.
30 years. It can expand and contract in the total amount based on what the federal government transfers to Clark County. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. This is a public hearing, so I will open this at this time for any comment. Again, the phone number for anyone wishing to comment during this public hearing is area code 702-589-9629. The number again is 702-589-9629. 9629. Again, anyone wishing to speak in public comment regarding the awarding of community development block grant money to Emergency Aid of Boulder City and Lend a Hand of Boulder City. All right, hearing none, I will close public comment at this time. I would just like to point out as well that both of these agencies right now, during this state of emergency, are clearly providing service to this community that would be very difficult to come by in any other way. So I can't think of a better use of community development money than providing it to these nonprofits. Any other questions or comments from council?
No, thank you.
All right, I'll entertain a motion then for approval of bill number, resolution number 7090.
I move to approve Resolution 7090.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, that's a 4-0 vote with Councilwoman Bridges abstaining. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mays. And that will bring us now to item number 8. This is in regard to the 6-month email retention policy. It's an item that I requested for discussion here this evening. I understand there's been some concern that there's no backup material. There's what's this all about? One of the things that the open meeting law requires of all public officials, all elected officials, is that we conduct our business in the public. That's the reason that I sometimes request agenda items, is to allow this council to discuss issues in the public. This is one of those issues. This came to my attention. I don't know if the message had always been there, but it was a few months ago that I noticed the message saying that emails would be deleted after 6 months. And that appears to have been the policy. I don't know if that banner was always there or if it came about because just around that time we also updated the email system. But that's concerning to me, to have that 6-month time frame to retain emails. So I wanted to open this up to council members. Again, I don't anticipate us being able to make changes to the policy tonight, but just to get feedback from each of the council members as to how they view a retention policy of that period of time. So any questions or comments from council members? Councilwoman Bridges?
Yeah, I do have some questions. And that is, first of all, this is talking, from what I understand, we're talking about the email retention policy on the main server. And that individual emails themselves, depending on the nature of their contents, would be saved in individual folders by the recipient for whatever amount of time. So if it had to do with a particular topic and it had to be kept for 7 years, it could be kept for 7 years in a folder. If it had to do with taxes, it would be kept in a tax folder by the clerk or by me, whoever received that it was important to keep that for a particular amount of time. So this is simply the amount of time that it stays on the server before it disappears, correct?
I do want to, make sure that we don't get too far into the technical aspects of this.
Okay.
Certainly that's a valid question. I do think that the reference might be to not the email system, but what's called OneDrive or cloud storage. So I don't want to get too far into it, but if your question is that each individual has the ability to move a message into some other area rather than their email system, is that what you're getting at?
Right. That my question. I'm just confirming for myself that we're talking about the main server. That emails from our individual accounts or other city going into the city's server are what we're talking about having a 6-month life in that, as opposed to individuals, any given individual who works for the city who receives an email that they put it in their own set of personal folders.
Okay, and again, I don't know that we have anyone here who can provide us a high level of technical explanation of these systems.
I can certainly answer that question, Mayor, from Councilmember Bridges.
Please offer the explanation that you have.
The explanation I have is that I administer the program and I set the guidelines for the program per our city code. And I understand your question, Councilmember Bridges, and you are correct. That just because it came in the form of an email doesn't mean it gets deleted in 6 months. If it's evaluated as a record, it gets retained for the retention period assigned to that particular record, but it has to come out of the email system in order to be preserved properly.
Thank you. So, and that then would require some action by the user to do that with the email? Okay.
Thank you. That answers my question.
Okay. Any other questions or comments? Councilwoman Folda?
Thank you. I don't have a lot of comments on this, but that's in my past life. I have worked in records, and preserving records is very serious. There's laws that govern that. There's a lot of training that goes along with that. The tricky thing with the 6-month policy the thing that I would see is that sometimes projects and conversations and things aren't really an issue until they become an issue. And so because some things can drag on for some time, we've talked about, just in the short time I've been on council, there's been instances where there's back and forth conversation that's gone back years that we're still talking about. So, I do have a concern if there's something that we didn't see it as an issue, it got deleted in the 6 month, and then a year or two down the line, it's still that issue is going forward, and we don't have that information. So, yes, and I understand that the user can move that because the majority of work should not happen over email, but a lot of work does. That's just the technical world that we live in, so a lot of conversation does occur over email. And so from moving from email to a document, that there's some user error in that. When I worked in records, our records unit was in charge of all that stuff. And when things came to us that had been touched by other people, there's a lot of error when you're not trained in those things or have knowledge of how that needs to work. And so, if we're relying on a user to move something that started as an email into a document, I just want to emphasize the training and education that would have to happen with that, as well as any overturn that we may have in employment where documents might still be in an email form when someone, leaves or comes back. So there's just some thought on that. 6 months is a short amount of time for these projects that would go on for years. And that's just kind of some of my thoughts.
Thank you. Councilman Adams?
I guess I guess it's not an issue, but I guess one of the areas that, of discussion that I certainly would be interested in is if there is concern that this amount of period is short because I guess essentially the emails themselves aren't, it's the content that might be considered a public record, right? Not necessarily just because it's an email, but emails can constitute public records based on what that content is. So if there is concern that potentially there is oversight or something where potentially public records are being misidentified or not identified and being destroyed, that's something that we would, I don't know if just extension solves that problem. I don't know. Again, I'm not saying that that's what we're really talking about, but when it comes to email retention and that policy, obviously that kind of goes hand in hand and why we want to retain. So I would, certainly want to have that discussion about what type of policy would actually help to ensure that sort of thing so that there's a purpose to the retention. There's a reason why we retain emails for a certain amount of period, and there's also a reason on why we get rid of, because there is server capacity, there is there are limits to things. Otherwise, then we start getting into additional costs, additional hardware and stuff like that. So that's kind of the area where I would be most interested in having that discussion is if we were to talk about any change in policy is what effect are we looking to have with that type of policy change. So
you're primarily referring to expense. What expense would be involved?
Well, I mean, there is that side of it, but it's also if there is an issue that we are trying to perhaps address, how do we actually best address it? If is 1 year there's just extending it from 6 months to a year? Is that enough? Is it need to be, as Councilman Folda said, it could be something that goes on for years. I mean, it's more so what is the best way to address that sort of, if there is issues with the policy, what is that issue, and then how is it best addressed? So we're kind of just having an open dialogue here, so it's hard to really determine which way, what that conversation is having, but that's just kind of where my head would go when talking about this sort of thing.
Okay. Councilwoman Hoskins?
It looks like she's on. Oh, maybe it got disconnected.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, there we are.
Okay, all right, sorry. 6 months is a very short period of time. We just noticed that in this epidemic that we've had, 2 months has gone by already. I would think that we could go longer than 6 months. The amount of months, I think, could be determined. But the cost of storage has gone down so dramatically in the past few years that, when we used to store things, it was very expensive. It's not that expensive anymore. So I think it's something we should address. And some places, you have to keep it forever and ever, amen, but depending on the content. So it is an item that needs to be discussed. Thank you.
Thank you. Some of the thoughts that I had on this have been reflected in some of the comments that have already been made. But I'd like to point out, too, that email to me is a work tool. It's a system that I rely heavily on to communicate with people, to have information sent to me, and be able to use that as a resource at any time. And certainly systems have improved greatly. I've worked in the IT industry for about 20 years and saw a lot of changes occur in how these systems function. You can access your email from your phone now. It used to be once you left the office, you never saw your email until the next day when you came in. Then they were nice enough to figure out, well, if we give you a laptop, you can work more from home after you get off work. So that was one way that we were able to extend the email system further than what it had been available before. And what I've seen over that period of time is it has just become integral to how we function now. Certainly, I think Councilwoman Hoskins had mentioned it. The amount of information that is coming at us right now in this emergency situation is enormous. And to look at an email message now and say, this is important, I need to preserve this document, I don't know that that's possible with the amount of information coming in, with the different types of information that is coming in, and I don't know that that's a productive use of my time to say, well, I need to make a decision whether to preserve this or not preserve it. So I think that's a big factor as well. There could be information that a year from now we will need as a reference with regard to this emergency, but that applies to many things as well. The other thing is, I believe it's clear that the use of email systems now may not make every email subject to the public records law, but it certainly makes almost every email subject to the public records law. The other thing about public records laws are they may specify the date that you, or the period of time that you must keep something, but they seldom specify the amount of time where you must destroy a record. It's left to be an option that you must keep it for a certain period of time, but you're not required that as soon as that time comes up to destroy that record. We have records retention, not records destruction guidelines, except for a few special cases. And I see, Madam City Clerk, that you have a disagreement. So again, if you have a comment, please make your comment.
We do have destruction periods where we have to destroy records in a manner that is guided by a state-approved records retention and disposition schedule. We destroy records every single year, and we do it in a manner that's consistent to protect the city from liability. So yes, we do have to destroy those records in a uniform manner according to their destruction and their retention period.
Thank you. And again, that the way the NRS is worded, it actually seems to give a lot of flexibility. So within the NRS itself, it does not indicate specific time periods of retention or destruction. The wording that I have found keeps referring to different entities may establish schedules on their own. I don't find any certain language in there that specifies much more than that. So again, Madam City Clerk, if you could comment then on, has the city developed its own process, and is that reviewed by anyone, or is that just up to us? Or does the state have some standards and tell each municipality that they must follow that same standard?
Mayor, the state does have a program, and we do submit our records retention period to the state for approval. We've done that for many years. I am not prepared to go into this conversation and shoot from the hip. I'm happy always to provide information to the council and give you any information, but we're getting into the daily functions and administration, which I'm always happy to share that, but I'm not prepared to go into this conversation when I didn't know what this conversation was about until just now.
And again, I'm not asking you for that level of detail. You had made a comment about how the schedule that you have is prepared. That's all I'm asking about at this time. If there's a need for further detail, again, there's certainly an opportunity to do that at another meeting with a different agenda item.
There's also the opportunity to come into my office anytime and talk to me about it, because it's an administrative function of the city.
Okay, I appreciate that, thank you. Okay, some other issues that I see with any type of email policy is, how do the users know if a record is going to be retained for a specific period of time, and how they can go about doing that? I understand that there are personal folders out on cloud storage available to us. I've never accessed that. I certainly have at other jobs that I've had, But in my service on the council, I've not received any specific instructions how that system works. A couple of other items that I have for it. I did note that the policy, that the year it was developed in 2014, when I thought back to, well, what was happening in 2014, there was a lot of upheaval with our local government and our city at large. I don't recall the specific time, but there were issues about emails being deleted that may have pertained to law enforcement actions. This was also the period of time that the horrible situation out at the animal shelter had become an issue for the city. And when I look at, well, okay, do you have some need to make changes to a policy and what those needs might be? Certainly one of the major reasons that I've tried to serve on city council is what I saw in the past to be a lack of transparency. In other environments and other corporate environments that I've worked in, this 6-month period is a very short period of time. Normally what I've seen is that the email systems have a limit on the amount of space that's available to each user. There is no real date set as far as when something might be deleted. Or there might be a time period where an email will be deleted, but it's usually been in the range of 12 to 24 months and not a 6-month period of time. Councilwoman Hoskins had pointed out earlier as well that the cost of storage now for these different items is extremely low compared to what it used to be in the past. So a couple of things that I think would benefit the council is, one, to get a schedule of what the records retention are for all documents for the city and have us have the opportunity to take a look at that. I did note when looking through the standard operating procedure for the city, the definitions certainly seem to indicate that the majority of my emails anyway would be considered public documents. There are references in here of personal documents. Somebody may ask you if you want to go to lunch. Probably not a need to preserve that particular document. But there are many other documents that I think certainly would fit that. I know we had a situation just last year when we were considering appointment to an open seat on this council, where a records request was made by a citizen to produce all emails relating to that appointment. Excuse me. That included not only the email system provided by the city, but my personal emails as well. Now that discussion period was less than 6 months, but I don't know that state law restricts that request from a citizen to a 6-month or less period of time. So I think greater explanation on what is required to be retained would also be necessary. I think understanding the cost of this is also something we would need to take a look at and make a decision if it's not required by law. However, it's important to our functioning as members of council and probably members of the city staff. What would that period of time be then? So I think there are some specific things that can be looked at. Other members of council have already mentioned things similar to that. Mr. Adams, what I've said, does that sum up what you're looking for?
Yeah, that was kind of if the, kind of identifying what the concern is with the current issue and then discussing how to best address that. I think that's kind of, where we're all kind of getting at right now with that, so.
Okay, is there any other specific requests? Councilwoman Bridges?
Yeah, really, I looked at this and I wasn't sure what was broken. And I guess I've been using email so long that when I get an email from someone, I make a decision what folder, whether I'm using Gmail or whatever kind of email account, that I save it into the folder that it relates to, so that when someone says, did you get my email about whatever, the airport or so on, that I look at it and it's in the airport, and that those folders don't disappear. I mean, I could have something back from last March, a year ago, that would still be in those folders, and that I'm not losing my personal emails as long as I put them in my personal folders. Maybe we need to know exactly that process to make sure that's what people are doing, but I would be very lost if I just had 1,000 emails all in one long column, rather than being able to refer to them by their particular, I mean, I have 2019, whatever, 2020, so that I can go back and easily address that. And I assume that that's the case with the city clerk, with that she or whoever has that job is responsible for maintaining that filing system for emails. I don't know how often you actually have to go back to the server to find an email.
Well, I would just say that I've received training as an Exchange email administrator, and my understanding is not the same that you have. Subfolders within an email account are stored on the Exchange server and may or may not be subject to the same policy for deletion, but I think we are talking about two different things. So that may be something else we would need as an explanation of, are emails deleted out of subfolders, or are they only deleted out of the inbox of the user? Would that be what you're getting at then?
I just assume that's what people did, honest to goodness.
And I think too, it's important to note that when you talk about different email systems such as Gmail versus Microsoft Exchange, they're very different, the rules that Google sets for its users compared to what may be set by the administrators for the city's email system.
So we're talking specifically about the Exchange email server.
Well, again, I don't know that we have the technical expertise here today to go into that, but that would be a request then to find out exactly what that refers to, or are we talking about another function within the Microsoft Office suite of products, such as what's called OneDrive, which is separate from the email system. And also any other storage capabilities that the city may have within its computer system that are different from storage within the email system. Councilman Adams?
Yeah, I guess one question that did pop into my head, and it's I'm not necessarily looking for the answer right this second, but when we talk about emails and what constitutes whether it's a public record or not, I guess I would be curious to know how many emails are regularly identified as being necessary for being, this is pertaining to what would be considered a public record. How many of those are being identified? And so I'd just be kind of curious what that overall, what the practice looks like. So it's that type of information.
Now, I think that would be a good indication of whether the distinction is understood or not. I agree there. Councilwoman Folda, any other suggestions or recommendations or requests?
Same, just kind of what I already said, that I think training is really important to make sure that the users, if we're relying on the users to determine if this is a record that needs to be kept or not, that there should be training and knowledge of what that training is. And also just the communication line, if something's determined to be a litigation or claim or a public records request, then it would be a document that you would keep. And so what does that communication look like that users are made aware that those documents would need to be kept under that exception.
Thank you. Councilwoman Hoskins?
No other.
Okay. Again, this item was listed as for discussion and possible direction to city staff. City staff, are there any questions as far as what requests are being made? Okay, we will then go ahead and move on to item number 9, presentation regarding the city's COVID-19 response. Communications Manager Lisa LaPlante.
All right. COVID-19. We have been living and breathing it for about the last 6 weeks since the state declaration, state of an emergency was signed. That was back on March 15th. So we're going to go through a kind of a helicopter view of what all has gone on in public safety, a little bit in finance. We won't get too much into the weeds there, and on communications. So it was on March 15th that the emergency declaration was signed. Sorry, we're having a little trouble here. Holly, you wanted, okay, there we go. As you know, the emergency declaration is to assist local governments in responding to emerging conditions. This has been one large emerging condition as things have changed on almost a daily basis. We also wanted to be able to respond and recover quickly. This also allowed for some administrative leniency, whereas, for example, we have had these meetings as a live stream. Part of that was a directive from the governor, but also we required that 6-foot social distancing, and so changing some administrative policies, not having a rush to get things pushed through was very helpful in the last few weeks. Enforcement of ordinances, rules, regulations, purchasing, and government functions. You're going to hear a lot about PPE, personal protective equipment, in the next couple of minutes. And then also, it provides flexibility in staffing levels and assignments, which has been very important because there have been things that people have had to do that normally wouldn't have been their responsibility. One thing I have to say is that this team has really stepped up. We've seen our purchasing manager assisting with collections of items for our senior center, our emergency aid of Boulder City. We've seen Holly back there has helped out. She's been I've called her my senior liaison. She's been doing a fantastic job making sure that the folks at the senior center are getting everything that they need. So, and then obviously a few other people jumping into roles are weekend, we call her the weekend warrior. Jackie Yaxon has been very helpful in assisting me in communications. As you know, there have been a lot of communications that have had to go on in the last few weeks. The videos, Brock Armentrout has been very helpful in helping me with the videos. Our clerk's office has been helping me as well, as far as making sure that we're keeping track of all of the records that we need to, as you guys were talking about, records that we might need at a later date. So helping advise me on what needs to be saved and what isn't a record that I personally need to save. So we're going to start with the Boulder City Fire Department. Boy, they've had a lot going on over there. They developed the continuity of operations plan, established a formal policy for firefighter response to suspected COVID-19 incidents. This has been important because we have had quite a few calls of people wondering, you know, I have a cough, do you think I have COVID? So being sure that the firefighters know when they have to go in with certain protective equipment to respond to those incidents. They also identified appropriate PPE needs. So they made sure that the firefighters, the frontline staff have the equipment that they need when they go into a situation. They did obtain a significant amount of PPE for the community response through the multi-agency coordinating center logistics. So we do have masks, we do have gloves, we do have gowns if necessary. So we do actually have the equipment we need, which, at the beginning of this, there were a lot of questions if we'd have that. And so they've done a great job getting that pulled together. Working with regional partners to establish safe policies and practices for city employees who are responding to the incident. Again, police and fire are the front line that are responding to this, but there are also staff members who are dealing with the public, whether it's in community development with receiving documentation, or it's somebody down in utilities talking to somebody about how to make sure that their deferrals for utility payments go through. So making sure that we're following all of those policies has been critical. The fire department also worked with the Boulder City Police Department to use appropriate screening tools for when receiving 911 calls. Again, you hear a new virus, you think, oh, I've got a tickle in the back of my throat, could it be COVID? So knowing how to respond to those questions that might be asked. And also working with the Boulder City Hospital to stand up isolation and quarantine shelters, which we haven't had to use. And, it's been great that partnership with the hospital, getting frequently asked questions down on paper so that we can provide information to staff, to residents, to those who are concerned. And then finally, working with EOC staff to keep all of the city staff, elected leaders, and community informed of this constantly evolving response. Now, as you know, the incident commander has been Chief Gray. He has been responsible for managing the Emergency Operations Center. We were meeting on a daily basis. We're now down to twice a week. They also meet with each council member to discuss what's going on, to make sure that you all are informed as well. They've been doing a great job of making sure everybody is up to speed on what's going on in this evolving situation. The incident commander utilizes the National Incident Management System, NIMS, Incident Command Structure, ICS. This is critical. Anyone who works in city government who goes through this ICS course, and I think some of you have actually gone through the ICS courses as well, you know how critical it is to speak with one voice, to get the training ahead of time, to understand where everybody fits into an emergency response. And being able to get that ICS, the incident command structure together immediately has been critical in making sure that we manage this situation properly. He also coordinates with the MAC, the Multi-Agency Coordination Center, leads EOC managers in setting objectives for each operational period to ensure that personnel and resources are being used to bring the incident to a safe conclusion. Safety and health and well-being are always our priority. And then, there are other priorities that come after that, but always at the top of the list is the safety and wellness of our employees and our community. Managing daily briefings with EOC personnel, senior staff, Boulder City Hospital, and Council. As I mentioned, that has gone down to twice a week with those briefings, but they are still keeping information flow going through communications, whether it be over the phone, via email, or in different meetings. Overseeing the management of all incident operations, directing logistics, Paul Sikora, and obtaining PPE and donation efforts. As I mentioned, Paul's been fantastic in making sure that those efforts are being cordoned off. He keeps an area in the parking lot where people bring donations. Our most donated day was just last Wednesday. We had seen kind of a taper off, and so we went to 1 day a week instead of 2 days a week, and actually on Wednesday we had a great outpouring of support, and on Thursday we're able to give a lot of items to our local agencies. And then of course ensuring that critical supplies are maintained for the entire duration of the incident. We do feel at this point that we can handle if there is a surge or a secondary surge. We've been able to obtain all of the pieces that we need at this point. So Boulder City Police Department has been integral in all of this as well. They've actually implemented new action orders, including prioritizing operations, personnel duties, and responsibilities. They've postponed elective time off and training, as well as non-essential functions, to make sure that they are able to respond to any emergencies as needed. They did, as well as the City Hall, they did restrict access to the building, which had meant a couple of items have been put on hold. For example, they can't do fingerprinting right now. They can't do DMV services right now. But the state has actually put a hold on the DMV services as well. So it wouldn't matter if they were able to open the building up. The DMV isn't doing any business right now with the public. They do personnel temperature and test monitoring, just as we do here at City Hall. They modified procedures for traffic stops and enforcements. So in order to talk to somebody, they want to make sure that they're maintaining social distancing as well, that they're approaching people with the thought of health being top of mind when they talk to folks in those traffic stops. They did suspend most warrant and custody arrests for misdemeanors, which is in line with what a lot of the metropolitan area has done, and then suspended breath testing for suspected DUIs. So they are actually doing different testing as opposed to doing the testing with the breathalyzer, because it does require close proximity and expelling air, which is how you catch COVID. BCPD compliance has been pretty active. They've done compliance checks since March 20th, which is when there was a lot of confusion about gathering and use of public space. The governor's directives initially were met with some resistance or confusion. We actually experienced more confusion than anything else here in Boulder City. What we found was that a lot of places were not necessarily trying to, but didn't realize that maybe if they left their chairs out front, people might gather and sit on their chairs out in front of their restaurants. And so we had to talk to them. We ended up giving out about 10 to 15 warning packets. And we also suspended encroachment permits, because that's where we found that people were actually running into an issue. So we did receive several calls from the general public. Sometimes people would call and say, oh, I think I saw the salon open, or I saw somebody inside of we actually had a posting on social media. Somebody thought they saw somebody inside of a bar, and that was okay. They could be inside the bar, they just couldn't be doing business. So all of those were checked out, no apparent violations, but there still is some confusion. We did receive a message over the weekend. Somebody was upset because a neighbor had more than 10 people at their house. Well, you can if they're family members. There's no enforcement action available in those directives. So the police can't go up into a house and say everybody has to leave. They can encourage people, but if it's a family member, if there's 6 members of one family and 5 members of another family, there's little that can be done at that point. So again, confusion, and I'm hoping Thursday, I sent you guys some good news. Thursday, we're expecting a news conference, so hopefully we'll have some clarification on how it's going to start moving forward in May. Again, on finance, I'm not going to go too much into this, because we did spend almost 4 hours last week talking about it, but the finance department did create a tracking system within the city's financial software in order to track all of the COVID-related expenses. Some of these may be reimbursable at a later date through FEMA, so we want to make sure that we're keeping an eye on all of those. So the state of emergency purchasing procedures were enacted to make sure that Boulder City is able to capture any virus-related expenses that may be reimbursable in the future, and to review city purchases to be sure that we have the necessary funds that may be required for emergency supplies, equipment, and services. This is also critical, as we all know, we are facing a shortfall, and so making sure that if we do have an expense, that we're running it up the chain to make sure that we're getting the best bang for our buck, so to speak, that we actually need it and what the necessity is, and making sure that it's economical for the city. And then finally, on communications, bcnv.org/COVID-19 has been a centralized webpage for news, information, and resources. We provide daily updates from county, state, and federal agencies on that page. There are also updates provided on our social media platforms on a regular basis. This site also houses video messages that have been done by council, and I appreciate you guys for doing those. They've actually been met with a lot of excitement and enthusiasm awesome, and we've got a couple more that are going to be coming out this week, as a matter of fact. Message management has been important, so daily engagement with other PIOs from Clark County and state has been important. Every morning I am on the phone Monday through Friday with the Clark County PIOs, and there's about 35 of us on that call. And then at about 11:30, I'm on a second, 11 o'clock, I'm on a second conference call, and that is with the state PIOs. There are between 50 and 70 people on that call every day. It's important because it helps us share messaging that we will be sharing with local media, with stakeholders, and with staff. But it's also important because it gives us a chance to talk about misinformation and rumors, which has been an issue over the past few weeks. We make sure that we're talking to each other about anything that might be popping up. For example, we've had some information that went out a few weeks ago. It was in regards to a possible protest. And so some of the agencies weren't aware of the protest that was going to be taking place. Making sure that they knew what was being talked about on social media was helpful for all of us to prepare for it. Obviously, the protests here have been mild in comparison with other parts of the country. So, but being sure that we're all talking about it, just so that we're all on the same page and know what to expect. My last page is the questions page, but before I get to that, I want to tell you all a couple of other things that didn't make it into the PowerPoint presentation. One of the questions that has been asked quite a bit is in regards to utilities. There have been so many people who've lost their jobs, they've lost their job security, they are not sure how they're going to pay their bills. We've been trying to work to make sure that we're managing information that can help them, whether it's get food, money for rent, but importantly for us is those deferrals. We've been working with people who are struggling to pay their utility bills. We make arrangements for them. About 85 accounts came up late on April 22nd. We're working with those residents on sharing resources in addition to seeking those deferrals. And again, Councilwoman Folda is the one who suggested the one-page document that we have. I've actually I made the font bigger because it was kind of hard to read. But a resident had actually suggested a couple of changes as well. And so I worked with the resident and we discussed putting everything into bigger font, some bigger headings, and so now it's actually two sides of a page, but it's still just one page. My understanding is that our staff in utilities is actually giving this information to those who are seeking deferrals, which is fantastic because it does talk about assistance for utilities, assistance for rent, food and financial resources, how to apply for unemployment. So this document has been very helpful and is getting out into the hands of folks here in Boulder City. So with that, questions?
Thank you. Questions or comments? Councilman Adams?
Yes, I know our community development department has been doing a lot of coordination efforts, trying to reach out to, for small businesses that have questions, for even the individuals, volunteer. Have we gotten much feedback as to how effective that's been at this point? If there's anything additional that we can be doing to better that situation, or does that seem to be reaching some of the goals that we were hoping for? Do we have much of that information yet?
Yeah, we've gotten some excellent feedback, and obviously there's a lot of moving parts to that because we're talking about federal government, we're talking about state government, but a lot of questions that keep coming to us, we're able to answer most of them. The biggest one is, when can I open my doors again? That one hopefully we'll have some answers to on Thursday. But Rafi over in community development, as well as Michael Mays, have been outstanding. They've been in touch with our Boulder City Chamber of Commerce a couple of times a week, maybe even more than that. When residents call with questions, they're right on it, making sure that they're getting responses quickly. Unfortunately, some of those answers are, we just have to take a wait and see approach. April 30th is really our big deadline, and so hopefully we'll know more on April 30th.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Councilwoman Bridges?
Yeah, I just wanted to say thank you for everybody's hard work. I am so impressed at this well-oiled machine that all the emails that I get from you, the weekly updates, especially having just come out of the training, the 400, the 300, and the 800. Going through all of that, the ICS training, and then actually unfortunately having an opportunity to see how well it works. But I just tremendously appreciate all the communication, all the information. It helps. It helps when I talk to somebody and I'm able to refer them to something that I've heard, that I not just heard in the community, but something that's actually come to me in writing. So thank you.
Thank you. I am not an expert by any means. I've been through 5 state of emergencies so far in my career. So, and 4 of them were all natural related. They were not a virus pandemic. But I have to say, in those 5 emergencies that I've been through, this team has been the best. And my friends in Michigan are going to give me grief for that probably at a later date. But this team has been incredible, and everybody has taken charge of what their area is and respected each other and been able to talk things out. No yelling, no screaming, no rushing out of a room. Everybody's been great. So hopefully my friends in Michigan will talk to me again later.
Thank you. Councilwoman Fulda?
Thank you. Yes, I just wanted to highlight some of those things that our hospital did not reach capacity, and if it had reached a certain point, that we did have a plan in place, and there was some concern from the citizens about where that was at. Other things like unemployment insurance is another thing that's brought up, and although Boulder City doesn't handle that, we have those resources, and so thank you for that 1-page, almost 2-page now, folder, but it gives resources to people to find out where that's going on, because without getting the information that I see a lot of the information coming through because it's passed through but just Joe Citizen wouldn't see what's going on. It's changing so fast, so to keep track of what's going on, what's the new number now, or what's the new process now, that's really vital to have out there for the community. So I'm grateful that that was created, so that it makes it easy for me too to pass along the information, because it was hard to gather from multiple different sources. So it's nice to have that one source, all one thing. The other thing I wanted to mention was just how staff and the mayor has done as well is just to make sure that Boulder City is at the table. We're meeting with county and state, there's federal involved, and just making sure that Boulder City's voice is heard, whether that's money or repayment or PPE, just making sure that Boulder City is covered. We weren't always great at that in the past, and so I just really want to thank staff for stepping up and making sure that we had something at the table and that information gets passed around. I think that's kind of it. Everyone's just kind of, hopefully we get good news on the 30th, and I'm selfish saying that because my birthday's the next day. But I think we're all looking forward to, what's the next steps, and so that'll be interesting to know what happens on Thursday.
Absolutely. And I would be remiss if I didn't mention that the Parks Department was very helpful in helping us decide about where we would set up temporary camp if it was required. And again, we didn't need it. But also the courts. The courts have been fantastic working through all of this as well. And Judge Miller and his team, they've been just great about giving us information and helping us along the way. So truly a team effort. Everybody was at the table. And all of you helping me out with getting messaging out. It's been incredible that we've been able to all work together, whether it's getting flyers out, getting messaging out, going to news conferences at the county building. Everybody's done their part, and so like I said, it's great to see in the face of all of this fear and anxiety and stress that we could come together and work together.
Thank you. Councilwoman Hoskins?
Yes, I would just like to say thank you. And I'd like to put a shout out to the volunteers for our community phone bank. I've actually been helping on that. I've called 300 to 400 people. It's very enlightening to talk to the people, kind of give them a little bit of update, find out what problems they have, and et cetera. And so it was a very good service that we're providing. And so I want to thank all the volunteers for that, and thank you, Lisa, for everything that you're doing. And I don't know what you're going to do when this is all over with.
Oh, Al will find something, I'm sure.
Thank you. I'd just like to say that, in looking at all the work that city staff has done, city manager, Mr. Noyola, as difficult as this is, I think we really have done a pretty good job of finding the right touch for what needed to be done here in Boulder City. Certainly we have a spirit of volunteerism here that might be hard to match anywhere else. But our city staff also has looked for solutions, has looked to work with the city. I know the police chief has gone and spoken to businesses and worked out ways to try and make things happen. Fire Chief Gray, welcome to Boulder City. You arrived here and here we have a pandemic. So I appreciate the work you've done in organizing things. I don't want to lessen any of the efforts of our city employees because I think it's been outstanding. But I also, Councilwoman Folded referred to all of the other meetings that occur. And I can tell you that from, Senator Cortez Masto, Senator Rosen, Representative Lee, Representative Titus, Representative Horsford, and even up north, people are laser focused on what needs to be done here. They have pushed hard to get, money for hospitals, money for testing. Testing is going to be absolutely critical to how we go about our recovery here. And I know that the fire chief has been working on that. I know our local hospital is working on that. But that's essential. If the economy of Southern Nevada is going to recover, tourists have to feel safe coming here. So the real focus of people. But I can tell you too, our county commissioners, the other cities, the other mayors, the other city councils, we're all in this together. I've not seen any indication of anyone saying, well, I want this and I'm taking that from some other entity. We've received a tremendous amount of help from the city of Henderson in obtaining PPE. From the county, you mentioned the MAC, they've helped us out quite a bit here. These are difficult times, and I know, the emails I get from people, I wish there were things we could do that happen at other levels of government. We can't fix everything, but I really appreciate all the work that our city staff has done. They've gone above and beyond, in my opinion, and I really thank everyone for that.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments?
Honorable Mayor and Council, Al Noyola, your city manager. I also would like to just echo on behalf of the employees and a message directed to the employees that they are an absolute awesome team. They are focused, they know what their responsibilities are, and they have been looking out for the best interest of the community. And as the council and others have recognized, that they are about solutions. How do we get something done, particularly in the times that we are? Sometimes these kinds of crises actually bring out the best in all of us. And so I want to give a personal shout out to our employees because they are just an absolutely incredible team that we have. Just to mention that in about a week, we'll begin the Public Service Recognition Week. So it's a recognition, a week set aside for all public servants to be recognized by their communities for the work that they do day in and day out. So I just want to say to our employees, to you all, because you all are also public servants, and all the other public servants in this valley, that what an awesome job, not only day in, day out during a normal routine year, but also during these crises, that we can rise together, we can go forward and tackle this issue, not just individually as our own jurisdictions, but also collaboratively collectively as a region and as a state to deal with this particular issue that we're confronting, this pandemic. To you, the council, I want to express my gratitude because without your support, the employees would not be able to do the things that they were able to get accomplished given the environment that we were confronted with. So to you, as our leaders, our elected leaders, the representatives of this community, I thank you on behalf of our employees and myself. 2, 3 of you specifically mentioned what I call the unsung heroes of the community, and that's the volunteers. The volunteers in this community deserve an absolute huge shout out because much of what has gone on specifically in Boulder City absolutely could not have been accomplished without the volunteers in this community. So they deserve a special recognition, and as the city manager and as the council as a whole, you've already expressed that voice to the volunteers in this community. And then ultimately to the community as a whole. It has been difficult, it's been trying, but as a community we held together. We came together even stronger than we were on a daily basis. And we will come out of this a much better community, better bonded than ever before. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Again, thank you very much, Ms. LaPlante, for your presentation. We'll move to item number 10 then, City Manager's Report.
Honorable Mayor and Council, under the City Manager's Report, all items there are routine. I do want to mention that in the expenditure report, you will notice that the overall expenditure rate is going down. That is obviously in concert with the policies that have been put in place, that only necessary expenditure go forward. So most, if not all, discretionary expenditures have in essence been frozen. So we are starting to see the effect of that on the expenditure reports.
Thank you. Any questions from council on City Manager's Report? Councilwoman Hoskins, any questions on the City Manager's Report?
No, thank you.
Thank you. That then brings us to our last public comment period, item number 11. During this period of public comment, you may comment on any issue. We did have the 5-minute time limit. The phone number to call for public comment is 702-589-9629. Again, the phone number is 702-589-9629. Public comment is available. Phone number 702-589-9629. All right, hearing none, we will close public comment. We will not close public
And
comment.
I also have one to read.
Thank you.
Public comment. Hello? They hung up.
Well, apparently they've hung up. If you'd like to go ahead then with the written submission.
The following public comment is being sent on behalf of the residents of Gingerwood Mobile Home Park in Boulder City. Nearing the end of our journey in this world and our days dwindling down to a precious few, our energies are running low and we are in need of help. We are somehow forced to give up large chunks of our Social Security income that was intended for us seniors to have some sense of stability, peace, and dignity. We are experiencing a constantly eroding buying power that in the past has kept us able to fill our most basic needs. Our funds are being taken by our greedy out-of-state landlord who increases our rent seemingly at will. I understood long ago that if you want to control someone, control their finances. The landlord is not suffering. The people living here are suffering. I wish I didn't have to take a stand on what I think is obviously right. I only want what any human being wants, that is to live out our final years with as much joy and as little worry as possible. Take a look at the seniors. We have weathered many storms in our days. Perhaps those who cloak themselves as businessmen are a special breed that somehow assume the right to exploit others, maybe preying upon vulnerable seniors by draining their finances to enrich a greedy lifestyle is not illegal. It is certainly immoral. We are requesting that the City Council place on their agenda a discussion of the following points. That Gingerwood Mobile Home Park be zoned a 55-plus mobile home park. 2, a compassionate rent control ordinance whereby increases are based on Social Security increases. We thank you for considering our situation as one that needs attention. We, the undersigned, are in agreement with the above comments and requests. We also speak for those who are unable to come forward at this time. And it is signed by John Zugai, Ken Green, Joseph Pavlika, Trudy Pavlika, Shauna Dalton, Catherine Kokazinski, Norris Meredith, Sandra Terryberry, and Mardell Pettit. And that's the only one I have for general public comment that was submitted via email.
Thank you. We'll give one last opportunity for anyone who wishes to call in, 702-589-9629. All right, we'll close public comment then and move to our last item, City Council reports. Councilman Adams.
Thank you, Mayor. Yes, last week, the Board of Health, we held our first regular meeting since the emergency declaration. Obviously, we handled some more routine matters that still go on. That's obviously part of the difficulty of the task is there are still a number of critical sectors of public health that still need to be addressed while we also deal with this crisis. One of the things that we did talk about with regards to the impact and everything, obviously the big discussion right now is reopening and what does that look like. At this time, the health district is working to help establish guidelines and information resources for businesses so that when the time is deemed appropriate that they reopen, that they can do so in a safe and effective way. Obviously, a lot of that decision making is going to be coming from the governor's office, but I have no doubt in the health district's ability to help coordinate those efforts when the time is right. Obviously, I'm not here to speak on behalf of the health district in any way, but they really did impart that any discussion revolving around reopening needs to include strategy and it needs to include methodology, because a failure to have that being a part of that conversation would really be akin to, cutting loose the parachute just a little too early. I really want to thank all the hard work that Southern Nevada Health District has been putting into this. Like I said, there's a number of other efforts that they have to continue to maintain at this point, and that they are able to do that while also confronting this is just an incredible effort. On a personal note, I know that things are getting tight around there for a lot of us. Personally, for me, certainly I'm having to experience this. And while all of our hardships that we're experiencing right now may be unique to our own personal circumstances, this is something that we are all going through together. And I truly and honestly believe that in order for us to come through this at the other end, we need to do that together as well. So I know that means we're going to have some difficult discussions ahead of us, but that's all right. We are going to need to have those difficult decisions are going to need to be made, but we have to stay united in this front because that's how we come through at the end of this. So with that, that's the end of my. I will say, I know testing was mentioned, and our capacity for testing does continue to grow, and it is the goal that by June 1st, we are hoping that Southern Nevada as a whole, not necessarily District 2, be able to administer up to 10,000 tests a day. So we are working towards that goal, and that is going to be absolutely important to that discussion of reopening.
Thank you. Councilwoman Hoskins?
Nothing to report.
Thank you. Councilwoman Bridges?
The only thing of any interest is a number of years ago, Southern Nevada Water Authority purchased water rights up in Nye County and held on to it, and it was going to be a $15.5 billion pipeline project to bring water down to Las Vegas. And there was a lawsuit by the folks up there that said, no, you can't do that. And it was decided last week that the Southern Nevada Water Authority will not appeal the decision about the water rights. So that is no longer on the drawing board. They are not concerned about that. So that's what I learned from the Southern Nevada Water Authority. Thank you.
Councilwoman Folda?
Nope, I just wanted to say that, while we're all in the same boat, we're all dealing with it very differently. And I just see that in my own home day to day, tempers rise and then they fall, and just like outside. But I wanted to say that, now there are resources available that no one should, and that we have resources immediately in our community, that no one should be going hungry. There is food delivered at Mitchell Elementary from 7 to 10 a.m. every morning. If you have children in your home, there's food. They provide breakfast and lunch. We have resources through our nonprofits, through emergency aid. We have utilities that we can work with you if you're struggling to pay your bills. So please reach out if you are in need. This is not a time to be left on your own, because we are and have resources that are available, and to please reach out if your needs to do those. Otherwise, I just want to say we're just Boulder City, just keep plugging along and just do our best to get through all this. And just I'm really a bit inspired by all the, when people are having down days, there's someone always out there that does something positive out in the community and shares that, and it just kind of spreads like a wildfire, and lifting each other's spirits. And I just that's the great thing about Boulder City. And that's all.
Thank you. It was mentioned earlier by Mrs. LaPlante that Governor Sisolak will be, has announced that he'll be making some plans known here this week. We're certainly all looking forward to what that might be. I would ask people, the weather is heated up. Spring is transferred already into summer for us, apparently. But I want to make this clear too. If you look at, these various models that they keep talking about, if things open up too soon or too quickly, those models shift amazingly rapidly as well. And the way they shift is in a very bad way. More people get infected, more people die from this, and the problem goes on for a longer period of time. So I know that there's a lot of anticipation of people being able to get back to normal. We certainly all want to get back to normal. We want to find where normal is again. But this isn't the time to just think, well, tomorrow we go back to all of that. So please continue to stay at home. Only do essential business that you need to. Keep person-to-person contact to a limit. Wear a mask when you're not able to maintain that social distancing. I understand that's uncomfortable. I don't care for them at all, but that's part of what we need to do to make everyone else around us safe as well. Councilman Adams mentioned earlier about the testing as well. That's going to be a real challenge, but I know from meetings I've been in also, Las Vegas has to convince the world that this is a safe place to come. That applies to Boulder City as well. We need to show that we've done the work we need to do to stop the spread of this virus. So again, please hang in there. I know that changes are coming, but they're not here yet. Governor Sisolak will be making those announcements. They are based on guidelines established by President Trump and his administration, by medical experts. The state of Nevada is joining with other Western states so that we can address how things should be done in this area of the country. So again, please bear with us. I know it's getting very difficult. I knew from the beginning that if this went beyond a month, that starts to get very hard on people. Please hang in there. You're doing a great job, and I appreciate everything everyone is doing in this city. Thank you. And we're adjourned. Thank you.